This shows the first in a series with a focus on infrastructure as code. We're going to create an app service that's going to connect to a KeyVault and a storage account. And it's going to, when it's running in Azure, it's going to do that via User Assigned Managed Identities. And when we're running locally, we're going to do it via a service principal, an app registration. And the focus for this particular show will be bicep, using bicep, which is an evolution of ARM templates. In other shows, we'll take a look at Pulumi and Terraform. And one last note is one thing we're going to consider whilst creating the template to create the resources is that we have multiple environments. So we have a dev environment, UAT, and production. In UAT, you would typically deploy, a release candidate to for user acceptance testing, and then production obviously is where all your users are going to be hitting your service. So let's dive in. So the beginning is always the hardest part of the journey. Question right now is, where do we start? So we're going to need some code, and if we need code, we need source control. So I've created a little repository, and I'm going to keep pushing the changes to this repository as we go through the process of creating this infrastructure as code, the bicep. So we need to clone this locally. Currently, it's just an empty repository. So git clone and Azure IaC. There's a link to the repository in the show notes, so you can go and have a look at all the commits or the code that's there as a reference. One thing to note is the process I'm going to go through. I haven't worked out all of the problems up front, and then only show you the blue sky scenario to getting to the end result. We're going to hit a bunch of problems and solve those problems as we go. All right. We have our repo. So we're ready to add some code to it. What code do we need to add? So we're going to create some bicep code to create the resources, and we'll also create the API. But let's start with creating the resources in Azure using bicep. So how do we go about that? You've got a few choices. I'm going to show you 3 choices, and there's no doubt more, but these are the ones that I think are the top of the list, or at least they are for me. So there's some templates that Microsoft provides, quick start templates. You can go and find the resources you want to create. So for what we want to create, it's in the quick starts, Microsoft Web, and it's a web app, Linux Basic, I think. And then the main bicep, that could be a reasonable starting point. Just copy that, paste it in a file, and away you go. So that's one choice. Second choice, you could manually create the resources that you want. And then there's an export template that you can do. So if we wanted to create a web app, it's going to generate an ARM template for us. And once we have an ARM template, then there are ways to transform that into a bicep file. So again, but we're not going to use that one today. This is the world of AI. So I'd recommend starting with ChatGPT. Tell it what you want. It's pretty decent at giving you a good starting point that you can then refine. So let's ask ChatGPT to create what we need. So coming back to our diagram, what is it that we need? So create a bicep template and PowerShell script to run it. Resources, if I can type, needed are AppService, free tier please, storage account, and a User Assigned Managed Identity, UAMI. This UAMI should be an identity assigned on the app service, and it should have blob contributor access on the storage account. And let's see what happens. All right, I've let that run and it's generated a bicep for me and PowerShell. So let's just jump into Visual Studio Code and create our first upload to the repository with our new code. Let's make that a little bit bigger. All right. So this is the repository that I cloned recently. Currently it's empty. So let's create two new files. Actually, let's create two new folders. That's one called bicep and one called SRC, where we're going to put our API. Oops, I did that incorrectly. Let's go back to there and create source. I'll just delete that one. Ideal. All right. So under bicep, let's create a main.bicep and oops, a deploy.ps1 or run.bicep, doesn't really matter. And I'm also going to add a new file here just for the show, the chatGPT prompt, just a text file. So there is the text that I added to generate this initial bit of code. So I'm going to copy the bicep and drop that into here. And I'm going to copy the PowerShell code and drop that into here. Now the bicep looks very difficult to edit at the moment because it's all plain text. And the way to fix that is go into extensions, very simply type in bicep, or it's actually already prompting me down here. Do you want to install the recommended extension? So yes, let's do that. And voila, it's now color coded, much more easy to edit. Okay. So let's take a look through this code that's been created and see what's good and what's not, and we'll try and run it as well. So first I've pushed those changes up to GitHub. So we've got the chatGPT prompts file, the deploy and main bicep. So let's take a look. What did ChatGPT give us? So in the main bicep, we've got our storage account getting created, the UAMI, User Assigned Managed Identity, App Service plan, and the App Service that runs on it. This appears to have a problem, and the role assignment. And this is why I like to use ChatGPT to get the starting point, because to go and find, even though they're quite simple, but to find the right resource template for all of these different pieces, it's going to take a fair bit of time. Whereas ChatGPT has just spat out something that's reasonably good. This is going to be a problem. So we can just tell ChatGPT right now. Actually, I'll do it in a moment. The other thing that it's created is this PowerShell script to execute the bicep template and actually create the resources. What we want to do here first is just change the resource names. It's best to get a naming convention up front, create a naming convention for yourself, and stick to it. So Azure resource naming conventions, I Googled that not too long ago, so it came up straight away. This is obviously recommended by Microsoft. This is a good starting point. Personally, I like to have the environment first, and whatever works best for you and your situation. So I've created I've set those values. to names that with a convention that I like. Just to save time, I'm just going to paste it in. So the resource group has the environment first, the app service name, environment first, and the project that it's a part of. Storage accounts, you can't have dashes, follows a similar process. For a convention, and for the user assigned managed identity, the approach that I'm using with the user assigned managed identity is one UAMI gives access to one Azure resource. And so therefore I'm using the Azure resource name -UAMI as the naming convention. And that's the bicep that we're going to run. So if we change to bicep, and you can see the deploy file, and we just run the deploy file, and we should see an error. And there we have it. The property is not allowed. So let's tell ChatGPT that. And we're going to give it, I got this error. And can you use these names? And we'll just drop that in there. And now ChatGPT will hopefully fix the problem and rename the resources in its code. Okay, so that has finished. And yeah, ChatGPT is just saying that the Surma farm ID has now been moved inside properties block. Okay, so what does that look like? Let's grab the code and just simply replace it. And once it's replaced, we can just do a quick diff, and you can see that one's been removed and moved inside that properties block. Okay, does that work any better? Note that the resource group will have been created. Now dev Azure IaC bicep. Now it's running the code, so I'll just pause. This time it's completed without error, so let's go take a peek and see what this looks like in Azure. So that's our resource group there. We can see the app service plan and the app service. So let's go take a look. Inside our resource group, we've got all of the things that we've requested to be created, including the storage account. Cool. So let's have a look at the app service plan, and we wanted the identity hooked up to the user assigned managed identity, which is right there. And if we take a look at the user assigned managed identity, now this is the reason why I choose to use user assigned managed identities, one per resource, because you can go in here in associated resources and see all of the resources that have this user assigned managed identity assigned to it. And therefore you can see in one place in the portal all of the resources that have access to that storage account, at least that have access via the user assigned managed identity. So that's worked. So these are all of the resources that have been created by the bicep. I've made a slight change to include bicep in the name, so there isn't a naming conflict when I go and do the Pulumi and Terraform version for the show. So let's commit those changes. Let's have a look here. What changes do we have? We'll just add all of those changes and commit. So this is our, I don't need to do that. First working, deploy to Azure. Push that up. So we now have what we need for the storage account. Let's add a key vault. Should be a little bit trickier. So again, let's lean on ChatGPT to do most of the grunt work for us. I'll add this to our prompts file. So I'll just go KeyVault. This is a text file. So that's the prompt, which will be committed, so you can check that out. But basically, we're asking it to create a key vault with that name and a user assigned managed identity with that name. And the user assigned managed identity should be assigned key vault reader and the key vault secrets user. All right, let's see what it produces. That's just completed. So let's take a look. I'm just going to copy it and completely replace what's there, and we'll do the same for the PowerShell script. And then we'll come into here and let's take a look at what's changed. So obviously we've got a key vault name that needs to come in and KeyVault UAMI. So that's our user assigned managed identity for the app service. And what have we got down here? We've got the KeyVault user assigned managed identity. Oops. The role assignment of the reader and the secrets user. Now the KeyVault user assign is, it looks like that hasn't been assigned to the KeyVault. So let's just execute it and see what happens. Okay, first problem, the vault name is invalid and gives us a nice clear error. It's basically too long. So it's got to be between 3 and 24 characters. And the name that I've given it is, I think it's 26. So in this case, I'm just going to drop off, to keep it simple, I'm going to drop off the Aussie. So everything is being created in Australia East, so I don't really need that. It's not adding too much value. Now that will be fine. I also want to add one more thing. So I'm just going to create a secret in the key vault with name test secret and value of my test value. And we'll just, so that we can obviously test that we can get a secret. All right, I'll replace that once it completes and run it again and see what issues we hit this time. So that finished fairly quickly. What ChatGPT has done in this case is it's using PowerShell to add the secret, which is fine. That's probably a good way to do it normally, but for this particular secret, I want it created in the bicep. So please create the secret in the bicep, and then it'll go off and do that. All right, so I updated the bicep from ChatGPT, and you can see in there we've got our secret, which is now being generated. That ran successfully. I did get a warning saying that it was formatted and can be simplified by using the parent property. So if we find that secret, it's got this depends on. So I've copied this warning into ChatGPT, and it's come back with a modification. So I'm just going to cut and paste just that. Well, actually, let's just do the lot like we always do. So we'll go to bicep again, main bicep, wrong one. Let's go here, paste and save. So next time that runs, it shouldn't give us the warning, but we've got a different warning this time. All right, so I just grabbed that, jumped into ChatGPT and said, okay, yep, that's not valid. And give me a couple of different responses that are pretty much the same. But the end result, if I copy this code, the error's gone and the secret now uses the parent, and now it should work. So we'll run the deploy again, and that's completed without errors. So let's go take a look at what resources we have. All right, so it's looking like what we are expecting. This is our KeyVault. Let's take a look at the access policies, which is the last couple of bits here of the bicep template, where it's trying to assign reader and KeyVault secrets user. Sorry, not access policies, in the access control for IAM. And there we go. So we've got those two there. Now it's important to note that the KeyVault has to be set up for Azure role-based access control. To check that, come into settings, access configuration, and this box should be ticked, but it's not. So it's using access policies, which is okay, but that's not what we want. If you want to use UAMIs, User Assigned Managed Identities, it's got to be this one. Okay, so let's tell ChatGPT that we want this. On the KeyVault, we want this access control activated. And then it should give us a modification. All right, so this is the regenerated code. Copy that. This is the change. Enable RBAC authorization needs to be true. So let's grab that, put that in there. Now I also recently pushed changes to source control, so we'll only see what has changed here. And there it is. So enable RBAC. Now it already had the access policies. This isn't strictly necessary, I don't think, because we didn't have any previously, but maybe you're changing an existing one, which would be risky. But let's keep it there so that we're not making manual modifications. All right, so that's the only thing that's changed. Again, let's execute that and make sure that this changes. Now, the other thing that we can do is we want this app service to have that UAMI assigned to it. So again, we're going to have to tell ChatGPT, please assign the KeyVault UAMI to the app service. Regenerate it again. Now this is something we could easily hook up ourselves. I'm mainly going through and keeping what ChatGPT generates for simplicity, and because it makes it easier to demonstrate. Okay, so that failed because I don't have sufficient permissions to change the permission model. Okay, we'll leave that alone for a moment and come back to the please assigning the KeyVault UAMI to the app service. So what changes were made there? Take a look. Okay. So there we go. That should do that. Access policies. All right. To fix this problem, what I'm going to do, instead of messing around with permissions to change the permission model, I'm just going to delete the KeyVault because this is all brand new stuff. That should be fine. So we'll go here. But KeyVaults are tricky things. So I'm just going to go delete. Okay, so that's now gone. And if I rerun this, it should create it with the different permissions model. But what it's likely to do here is fail because it already exists. Because of the nature of key vaults and storing important values, there's some protection mechanisms built into Azure. So if you accidentally delete it, you can recover it reasonably easily. But that mechanism gets in the way if you delete it and then try and recreate something with the same name. So there's a conflict. A vault with the same name already exists in a deleted state. All right, so the way we can solve that problem is going to key vaults, and you can see manage deleted key vaults. So we'll just go in there. We should see the one that I just deleted. Oh, you've got to pick the subscription. Okay, no problem. And okay, we've got a bunch there. Let's just dev key vaults today. Let's just get rid of both of those and that one. And we're going to purge them. We'll just get rid of all of the ones that have been deleted. Now, when we run this, that problem should have gone away. And yes, it has. So no errors executing the bicep. So if we just refresh, we've got our Azure, the key vault is back again. So let's take a look and make sure that the access configuration is set up properly. We're now on the role-based access, and in the role-based access, we have what assignments? The secrets officer and the reader. Okay, so the key vault's looking pretty good there. If you have a look at the resource group, deployments, this is just useful to be familiar with. You can see the recent deployment. Now it's just simply called main. You can give it a different name and then you can see a history. And it's interesting because in here you can see any inputs that went into executing it and the outputs, which in our case, there isn't any. So that's just useful to note. Okay, so we've got those. Now the other thing that we asked to be included in the bicep was for the KeyVault UAMI to be added to the app service, which we can see here. So this is the other reason why I like to have one UAMI per resource, one UAMI that grants access to that resource. So now if I look at a particular resource that might be a consumer of those other resources, in these user assigned identities, I can see all of the resources that it has access to via the UAMIs. So I can see that it accesses this storage account and this KeyVault. All right, so that's looking great. Now what we need to do, oh, one more thing. Come back to the KeyVault and we'll just have a look at our secret. Okay, now I'm not authorized to view the secret, which is correct and good. Okay, so let's just very quickly fix this one to give myself access so that I can confirm that the secret was created and what the value is. I could add a role assignment to myself in here, but I'd recommend take a very small amount of extra time, come out and go into Microsoft Entra ID, and in there make a group. And we're going to call this developers, group name developers, for the Azure IaC. Okay. And oops, membership type assigned, so we'll create that. And then I'm going to add myself to the group. And I'm going to give permission to the group to have read access of the secrets. So I'll just very quickly add myself. There we go. Refresh. Now come back to the KeyVault. Oh, okay, into the KeyVault. And role assignments, add a role assignment. And I want to be a reader and a KeyVault secrets user. Actually, KeyVault secrets user is really the main thing I want. Select. And then it's developer group. Review and assign. It can take a little while for the permissions to come through, just be aware of that. And I think I might need reader as well. So I'm just going to grab that now so I don't waste any time checking and waiting whilst I'm missing an important permission. So that is everything that I should need. Now come into secrets and refresh. And I'll do a Control F5 to a hard refresh. So it can take several minutes sometimes, usually not quite that long, for those permissions to be applied, and even sometimes you might need to log out and log back in again. But I'm just going to pause until that comes through. Okay, after 5 minutes, I gave up, went to the gym, came back, hit refresh, and now we can see the secret. Okay, so if you want to just double check it, go into the current version, you can show the secret value, and it's my test value. Now that I have relevant permission via the group to see that secret. So it looks like our bicep is doing everything that it needs to do. Now we need to look at how do we test it, and connectivity to the KeyVault and the storage account from our app service. Put how to test running it in Azure, testing the connections in Azure in a different show. You can check that out here. One of the things that came up in that show was the operating system is currently Windows. So we want it to be Linux. It's .NET 8. There's no reason why we need to run it on Windows unless you have a dependency that requires it. So the why do we want to run it on Linux and not Windows? If you have a look at your app service plan and the costs associated, you can see like the B1 is $68 and the production level is 100. The basic production level, the cheapest one, is 125. On a Linux based system, the B1's $14 and the cheapest production 160 is about half the cost. So I don't see why you would want to run it on Windows. So let's figure out how we change that. It should be a very simple thing to do, but we're going to continue to lean on ChatGPT to generate it for us. So let's do that now. All right. So we come back. The app service. Next. There we go. That's our extra bit to add in. This is what we should already have there. So come back into the code, find the server farm. That's a SKU there. Kind is now Linux, and reserved indicates Linux. Okay, well, let's rerun the deploy. Are we in the right folder? So we'll just deploy and see if it works. So we got an error. You cannot change the OS hosting app at this time. Please recreate with the desired OS. So fair enough, you can't change the operating system type. Have to delete the farm in the app first. No problem. So we'll just go in and delete those resources. I'll just type delete to confirm. And then we'll rerun it once it completes. And it should create it as Linux. All done. App service plan and app deleted. Rerun. No errors this time. We come in here, we're just in the resource group, we'll just refresh that. Into the app, and the operating system is Windows. No, after a refresh, it's actually Linux. That was weird. Anyway, it appears to have worked. There are a lot of different configuration settings you might like to change. We've just seen how to change the operating system. One last one, which we'll have a look at today, is changing the publishing model from code to a container. So again, let's just ask ChatGPT, also change to publishing model container, so that we can deploy our Docker container rather than just deploying the code. All right, so nothing different on the app service plan. That would be expected. And then we've got this here. Let's just grab the whole chunk for the website for the container. And a couple of differences that we'll note are the site config, Linux FX version. Oh, not a couple of differences. Oh, and the kind has app, Linux, and container. So if we come back in here again and take a look at the site, I'm just going to drop this one below so we can then compare. That's weird. It didn't seem to copy the whole thing. Let's just try that again. Copy. I keep doing that. Keeps dragging me down to the bottom. Okay, that's better. All right, so that part's the same. App service name, location, app service. The site config is what we're noticing is different. And yes, the kind, and this has user assigned identities. So we can just get rid of the old version. Now we're going to need an appropriate registry here and container image. Let's go dig up something appropriate. We just grabbed a hello world example. Put that there. So let's run again and see if that swaps it for us. No errors, so it's happy to change the publishing model. Let's refresh and see if that worked. Probably could have refreshed from here. Okay, so we've got the publishing model of container, and the container image is our hello world. I'm not actually sure if that's going to show up. Let's have a look. Kind of works, but we get a big nasty error. I'm not going to debug this at the moment because that's not the point of this show, but you could come into the deployment center and have a look at the logs, and that will probably give us a clue as to what the error is. But it's not our image, and yeah, I'm not going to dig in too deep. Okay. Let's pull in the latest. Failed to start the site. Not sure why, but again, don't really care too much. It does retry a couple of times. And Docker's working properly according to that message, but we're probably missing some kind of setup or startup flag. I'm not sure. However, main point, it is now the app service is now a publishing model of container, so you can deploy your Docker images there, and we've specified which image which image to use in our bicep in the Linux FX version. So the final thing we want to take a look at is running this bicep for multiple environments. At the moment, we're set up to deploy to our dev environment. So let's make a few changes to the code and deploy to a UAT environment. Taking a look at our deploy and main bicep, the environment name is currently sort of hard-coded in the variables in the deploy file. We could just extract that and pass in the environment name as part of the names as they are now. But a better approach would be to require an additional parameter called environment, and make that a string. We won't give it a default. Okay, so now it's required, and then we'll use that within the main bicep file itself to build the names. So for example, instead of the storage account name, then we can build it the way that's very similar to how this has been built. So for the app service plan, we're going to do it like this, and we'll go environment dash. So the app service name, which is here, we then remove this guy, and we'll have an environment and we'll call that dev, and we're going to pass the environment in. So now if we rerun that, then the app service plan name here is going to be the same. So now what I'm going to do is just apply that through all the other bits. Okay, all those changes have been made. You can see we've removed dev from the PowerShell variable, and we're passing in the environment to the bicep script. Okay, so I'm just going to commit those so we can see environment passed in. So you can see those changes in the repo if you care to look. And then let's just rerun it and see if it works. I expect some sort of error. I expect I've missed something. To bicep. There's our deploy one. Okay. That's running. So the expectation is that it will just simply work with no changes, because all we've done is modified the code to pass in the variable name, but we shouldn't be creating anything new. Okay, so it's completed without error. We'll just refresh this. Nothing new. We've got one KeyVault, one storage account, one app service, and plan. So that seems to work. So let's now change this to UAT. We're just in that working tree. We'll get rid of that. Change this to UAT. Run it again, and this time we should now have a UAT resource group. Let's wait for the result and have a look. That has completed without error. So let's come out and have a look. Have we got a UAT dash resource group? Yes, we do. And it has the plan and app, KeyVault and storage account, and a couple of UAMIs. This one's a bit cleaner. I think the dev resource group has a couple of leftover managed identities that I need to clean up. So it's when you have these multiple environments that you see the true value of using IaC. We know with certainty that the UAT environment is exactly the same as the dev environment, which is invaluable once, when we have an issue, we can pretty much rule out that Azure resources are a problem, or the configuration of those resources, because we make that configuration code. All right, so that's it for setting up new environments. Obviously, to create a production environment, all we have to do is do that, and away we go. So in this show, we've taken a look at creating some bicep, leaning on ChatGPT to get the initial bicep that creates an app service on an app service plan, and that app connects to a KeyVault and a storage account via User Assigned Managed Identities. And all of that infrastructure is set up in our bicep. And as you can see, it's not really that difficult to get it going. So there's no reason for you to not set up some infrastructure as code for your projects. All right, well, thanks for watching. If you like the show, do the subscribe and like thing, and yeah, be kind, be curious, and go create something great.